This is Battleground PA, a PennLive podcast discussing the issues that matter to Pennsylvanians and documenting the events in the Keystone State and beyond that could shape how you vote in the 2024 elections.
Greetings, everyone. This is Joyce Davis. I'm PennLive's Outreach and Opinion Editor, and this is another Battleground PA podcast. And I am the one who's quite blessed to have two expert political analysts with me to talk about what a whirlwind we are in with regard to politics and the 2024 elections and everything and the international scene. But we have Jeffrey Lord with us here. Jeffrey, welcome. Wonderful smile and salute. And Rogette Harris. How are you, Rogette? Looking lovely as
Thank
ever.
you.
Good to have you guys with us. Okay, let's get to it. I mean, Jeff and I were talking a little bit before, and he's right. I mean, let's talk about the money. Now, I have to tell you, I wish someone would sue me for $355 million. I wish a judge would like that, because my goodness, I mean, where would I get it? But he obviously has some kind from Rogette or from you, Jeffrey. But let's talk about that. That is an awful lot of money. But it also means that, I mean, a court has now found the former president guilty of fraudulent behavior. I mean, Jeffrey, let's let you start in with that.
Well, I think the whole thing, of course, is ridiculous and political. I am obviously not in the real estate business, but I've met enough people in life over time who are. And, you know, the obvious, if you're selling your house, you want the best price you can get. So you say, well, the price is X. And then somebody will say, oh, no, I think it's, B or C or D or whatever. And you start negotiating, you go back and forth. That's how all of real estate works. And, eventually you come to some agreement that it's worth whatever, and the sale proceeds. So what they're accusing him of doing is trying to get the best deal for his properties or whatever that he does, which is what exactly as I heard, what was his name? I don't watch Shark Tank, but I am familiar with this guy. His name is Kevin Leary.
Yeah, I watch it.
Do you really?
Yes.
Well, it must be pretty good. It's got a lot of fans, and but he said exactly that, and he said this is crazy to be doing this. So.
Well, I hear what you're saying, except, I keep thinking, could I go and get a loan and say my house is valued at $6.5 million, and what would that allow me to get? And it makes me start thinking, well, maybe can I get away with that if the president can get away?
The thing is, Joyce, is that the bank then does its own estimate, and they decide what, you're worth, and then you go back and forth. It's not like Donald Trump or anybody else unilaterally gets to submit the worth of the property, and the bank just rolls over.
Sure, but I bought my share property, and I do have to attest that what I'm saying is true and based on some values and all of that under perjury. But anyway, Rogette, how is the other side doing this? I hear that Jeffrey and the Trump supporters say this is just business, but how are you viewing it?
I see a common theme where Donald Trump continues to present himself as something that he's not, being worth more than what he really is. We all know about all the bankruptcies and the businesses that had to go under and whatnot. But obviously he only talks about the positive of things. So I just see this as another way of him overinflating who he is. And he's just finally getting caught he's finally getting caught, brought to the carpet on this.
And it seems like this, though, Jeffrey, if I'm right, is having zilch impact on whatever his base is. He has not lost one supporter that he already right from this. So is that correct?
Yeah, it's right. I mean, I have long since come to the conclusion that the more they do these kind of things to him, the more intense his support gets. And I don't know if you've seen this story about the truckers, and all these truckers have said that they're livid about what's being done to Donald Trump in New York City. So they're going to refuse to cart, to transport, the essentials that happen every day in our society into New York. And one of the things that I pointed out is, as we all know, and maybe it's forgotten here, Manhattan, the heart of all of this, is an island.
Yep,
if
that's right.
you refuse to cross the bridges or go under the tunnels, they're pretty shortly going to have a supply problem on their hands, and
I
that's
tell
not
you,
good.
But it's
it
hurting
still gives
too.
me.
Can I get in here real quick, please?
Go ahead. Yeah,
So,
go ahead.
but yes, his base is getting stronger, but everyone else is continuing to leave him. Let's look at the special elections we just had last week. The Democrat Party won all of them, whether it was New York, whether it was Pennsylvania. Again, when it counts at the ballot booth, Donald Trump and his supporters are losing. So,
I mean, it's one of the things that still bothers me, though. There should be a rule of law, and somebody has determined the rule of law, and that's generally our court. And so I hear, I love the man. This is what I think. But if the courts say that this is wrong and it's fraudulent, it's broken law, it just baffles me that people who are clear thinking don't pause with this. I'm just confused
Well,
about.
the reason, Joyce, I think, is that they feel that the court system in New York, in this case, is corrupt, and they're going after Donald Trump because they hate him. This judge, I saw a headline today that had been found to be giving contributions to the Democratic Party. Well, that's hardly an impartial judge. And ditto, you got the same problem with the Attorney General of New York, who was on videotape repeatedly in her election campaign saying that if she's elected, she's going to go after Donald Trump. That is hardly impartial,
No, you're
blindfolded
absolutely right about
justice.
that. I can tell you a lot of people would be saying, well, maybe those black men in jail for marijuana possession should be let out because the whole system is corrupt. Remember, the other side claims the same thing frequently on the other end, but now we have the Supreme Court ruling again or refusing to rule again with regard to the former attorneys who filed frivolous lawsuits. I mean, that's now the Supreme Court. Is it also corrupt?
No, I think that's sort of a different horse of a different color. They're now
So they're okay.
separated from Donald Trump at this point, and they're on their own. And I don't, what I think people fixate on is the things that involve him personally, and
not necessarily what happens to his former attorneys who tried to do the claims of a fraudulent election and actually took it into court. And now they're being held responsible for that.
But that's the problem. Everyone is starting to be held responsible except for Donald Trump. Everyone is, I don't want to say everyone, but even Rudy Giuliani has a fine that he has to pay. People connected to Donald Trump are being held accountable for their actions. And a lot of these actions are based on what Donald Trump wants, what he wants, like these attorneys that are being held accountable. So we can't.
And yet the entire Republican Party is standing with him. Am I right, Jeff, that we don't see anybody walking away in the Republican establishment? It's still strongly going to back Donald Trump as the president.
This has been building long before Donald Trump arrived on the scene. As somebody who worked for President Reagan, I can tell you, in my much younger self, went to the 1976 Republican convention in Kansas City for the showdown between then former Governor Reagan and President Gerald Ford. And President Ford, a lovely, decent man, was the epitome of the Republican establishment. And they had this knockdown, drag-on fight. It was very, very dramatic. It involved at the last minute a switch of delegate votes in the Mississippi delegation that they had, in theory, been pledged to Reagan, and they switched to Ford, and Ford won by a handful of votes. I mean, it was very dramatic, to say the least. But there was sort of that undercurrent there all the time, and this began to surface again when Reagan ran against George H.W. Bush, et cetera. And so I just think that this battle is just the latest battle inside the Republican Party, where,
are you saying then that,
as you might say, the country club set is sort of losing the battle to working Americans who are flooding into the Republican Party and leaving the Democratic Party, which I find very interesting.
But if that was true, we would be losing elections, which we're not. But based on your example, does that mean that Donald Trump's delegates are going to switch in July at the Republican convention to another candidate? Is that
No,
the
I don't
purpose
think so.
was that the purpose
Don't
of your
think
example?
Nice try, but no, I don't think so.
nice try to that. Listen, this is a good history lesson, but we got to now pull it back into the current day. Thank you, Jeffrey, for always grounding us in your history. But let's talk now. I mean, I have to say, in this case, I think Biden has reason to be upset that, you know, people are, it doesn't seem to me like action is being taken with regard to helping Ukraine and even Israel. I mean, moving forward with this stuff, and people are going on vacation in Congress. What is going on there, Jeffrey? What is happening
What happening in terms of what, Joyce?
in terms of doing what they need to do to pass a resolution to help provide aid to Ukraine
Oh,
and to,
oh.
yeah,
Well,
they're just not.
I think there are some people who generally have misgivings
Well,
about it, which I can understand. For the life of
do
me,
you?
for the life of me, I don't understand. Good Lord, I can remember as a child my mother complaining about this kind of thing. That when a piece of legislation is introduced in Congress, you get all these other things that have nothing to do with the main topic
Yes.
attached, and
Yeah, yeah.
et cetera. And that's exactly what's going on here. The people that want to have a vote on how to deal with the border are being told, well, no, you got to deal with Ukraine and Israel and all of this kind of thing. They just want to start by fixing what they see as the problem at the border. And then you get into this kind of thing, and this happens repeatedly. There's nothing new here about this. This goes on all the time, and it is
But meanwhile, people are
exasperating.
dying. I mean, that's the thing. Meanwhile, including children in both these are dying.
Yeah.
I mean, this is horror. This is the horror of war that we should be doing something about. I mean, Rogette, I know this is a big deal in the Democratic Party. It's you've got a lot of people who are raising up and actually being quite upset with Biden because they don't think he's doing enough.
But if I'm not mistaken, there is a bill just for aid to Ukraine, and that's being held by the Congress, which is controlled by the Republican Party. So, we could also ask if there's a bill separate from all the issues that Jeffrey's talking about. Congress in the past has passed legislation to send aid to certain countries. So why can't this be another one of those situations?
Well, I was on a conference call today with the white people from the White House who were just livid over the fact that Congress is not
Right.
acting and that they have actually
And see, this is where I
Right.
think we need the civic
Right.
lessons, because people
Yes.
look at the president and thinks the president can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, however he wants. But that's why we have a House of Representatives. We have the balance of power.
And that's what they said. They can't do anything unless Congress.
I mean,
acts.
we're truly a
They cannot.
republic. I mean, I think that's something Jeff and I can even
Well,
explain.
that's in this particular case of the border. That's not exactly.
No, I'm talking about
right.
the aid to Ukraine or just passing legislation and
Yeah.
period. There's a bill there and everyone left town before passing it. But of course, who do you blame? The person you know. We can't name all
Jeff,
300 members of Congress, but we can name Joe Biden.
But Jeff, why is it? I mean, in your estimation, they don't want to do anything to. I mean, you have a good percentage of Republicans who now don't want to help Ukraine. At one point, when all this started, people clearly saw the threat that Russia posed, and there's still consensus, I think, that it's not going to stop at Ukraine. If they wipe out those people, they're going to keep rolling through Europe until somebody, Americans, come over and stop it.
I mean, I'm
That's the
inclined.
scenario.
I'm inclined to agree with that, Joyce. I mean, I think that Vladimir Putin. These comparisons always get, a bit out of hand. But I am inclined to think of him not unlike Adolf Hitler, and
Yeah.
that as somebody who watches a lot of history of World War II and reads about it and all of this kind of thing. First it was the part of the Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, and all this kind of thing. And then eventually it became Poland, and then it was, finally Russia and France and Belgium and on and on and on. And I was puzzling over this today. I don't understand what God's purpose is when
Oh, you
people
touched my heart. You're right.
when
What is the purpose of
people
war?
are walking this earth with such evil intent.
Yes,
I mean, when you think
absolutely
of
right.
all of the tens of thousands of deaths in Ukraine right this minute without going another day forward, all because Vladimir Putin wants to go back to the 9th century or whatever and you know, build the country the way it used to be centuries ago, or possibly during the Soviet Union. And, you know, a reading of Russian history, they've always had problems with Ukraine.
So then why
so
then
here
won't
we
the
are.
Republican Party bring that bill up for a vote to give money to Ukraine? In your opinion, and I'm asking you because obviously the
Well,
Congress is controlled
I
by
do
the
think that there are people. I do think there are people who believe that we've had a tendency as Americans to run around the world jumping into fights
Yes.
and spending American resources and American kids and all that. Vietnam being a classic example from our time period. So I do think that there are people. I mean, I don't think there's anything cynical about it. I think it's just a legit disagreement.
But it's such a tragic disagreement
Yes.
because again, this is not just about whether prices of oil will go up or so. It is people are dying.
Yes.
And our people could die if we have to go over there and stop them somewhere. And that I just don't get why people don't learn from what you try to teach us, Jeffrey, history. Why they don't learn from history. But we also got to look at Gaza. I mean, the U.S. has been pretty embarrassed at having now today apparently to veto a ceasefire resolution, you know, that the world is calling for. Even Great Britain simply abstained, but the United States, I mean, can you imagine if you're the UN, Linda, I mean, the UN ambassador there having to say, no, we don't want a ceasefire, the only country to do that? I mean,
yeah, I mean, it's very different, and you know, in its own way, it's not unlike the Ukraine-Russia problem. These are problems that have been going on for centuries. I mean, Jews have been in the Middle East for thousands of years. This particular problem does not date to 1948. It dates centuries ago. It still hasn't been resolved. There's no intention. I mean, when you got Hamas saying that they want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth and kill all the Jews.
And unfortunately, you now have Jews in power saying they want to wipe out Palestinians.
Yeah.
That is, I've heard. I mean, I was just in Israel, and you've got people in positions of power saying, yeah, they want to kill them all. I mean, come on. This, at some point, we have to take a stand and say everyone has a right to live. Or as Rogette said, all lives matter now, right? We're all on that, right? So I don't know. I just don't know how this is helping us. And I do wonder what impact is this having on the election?
Oh,
because
And that's why I think the decision is being made the way it's being made is because of the election. Personally.
I mean, I do think this is going to have an impact.
Yes.
And, you know, it's only February. This situation is going to unravel or do whatever it's going to do day by day by day. I'm not willing to predict until we get to November, frankly. And then because heaven only knows all the things that could happen between now and then with these two different situations and others. And, you know, as you've heard me say before, back there in 1963, when I went off to junior high school that fine November day, and the political gossip was, is it JFK running for re-election against Nelson Rockefeller or Barry Goldwater? And I got out of junior high school at 2:30 in the afternoon, and everybody was sobbing because President Kennedy had been assassinated, which in turn turned the whole picture inside out, upside down. And in our situation recently, you know, we go to bed and the world is at peace, and we wake up to find that Putin has invaded Ukraine, and then shortly thereafter that Hamas has invaded Israel. So I could not.
Or as we're wondering, will China say it can invade Taiwan?
But although these issues are important,
so there isn't a prayer that I would predict, because I just think anything out there can happen.
Go ahead, Rogette.
I mean, I do think these issues are important, obviously, and they will affect the election. But I was just on a panel last week, and it was for Black History Month. And I still think that the number one issues are going to be how Americans are doing for them and their family, as far as economically, as far as educationally, as far as I still think those issues are going to be the number one force.
I would agree with that, Rogette, because I just generally think that presidential elections, the economy is always first and foremost the issue. And if people perceive that things are in good shape, they'll vote for the candidate that they think is going to keep it in good shape. If they think that the world is falling apart in terms of the economy, they'll vote for the other guy. I just think that always happens because, people are living real life every day. They got to buy gas, they got to buy eggs, they got to get their kids educated.
True, but all of this stuff we've been talking about, all of this stuff overseas directly impacts that.
Yeah.
That's what people don't get. I mean, we do not live in an isolated world. Everything happening in the Middle East impacts the cost of gas, the cost.
But people don't vote on that. They just don't. Social issues, too, are going to be a factor in all of this.
What social issues? Abortion?
I think we're still dealing with abortion as an issue. We're still... I know we already spoke about immigration. We still have LGBTQ rights. We have those rights that we're going to be voting on. Education isn't a social issue, but depending on what race you are, it is. We still have social justice issues in this country.
Oh no, we dealt with that, Rogette. That's done. We don't have a problem. She looked at me.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't get that memo. Please forward it to me. Please do.
No problem. But I hear you. So let's pivot a little bit, because we do have a big deal coming up on Saturday, right? We do have Nikki, who going to come on once again.
Her home state.
She's got. Okay, Jeff, you're the expert here. What's going to happen?
I listened to her a little bit today, and I said to somebody, the thought crosses my mind that she's just becoming irrelevant. That
or worse, pathetic.
Yeah, she's running around doing all this stuff. And the South Carolina primary, the political fact of life, whether it's Nikki Haley or anybody else, if you're running for president and you can't carry your own state in a primary, that sends all kinds of bad signals out there.
That is a strong argument, but she won't give up. So I just wonder, is there any way she can pull a rabbit out of a hat for this one at all?
I don't see it. Because what's going to happen, and this always works this way, is that I think the magic number is 1,215 delegates to clinch the Republican nomination. At a certain point, this is just my guess at this point, Donald Trump is going to reach that magic number as all these primaries with delegates, build up. And the minute that happens, it's over for good for her or anybody else for that matter. He will have the votes.
We'll see what happens in South Carolina, but I will say this, Rogette. It looks like the news is good for Biden's raising money, right? He seems to have a big war chest there, outpacing outpacing the former president, because the former president has a new line of sneakers that's out there.
Yeah.
So I don't know, those golden sneakers might.
Joyce, I was listening to Sean Hannity's radio show this afternoon. And they had somebody on the staff whom I know look to see on eBay or some such thing how much they were going for. Honest to goodness, $45,000.
Oh my
Somebody
goodness.
was asking for.
Well, that's not the average guy. That's definitely not that. That's not necessarily his base.
I'm going to stick with the MyPillow slippers.
Okay, but Rogette, is that something? Right now Biden really is outpacing, and does that signal how serious many people are taking this race, that they really they feel a lot is on the line?
Definitely. And look at the small donations that he's receiving. He's getting a lot of small donations. We always focus obviously on the big money, the big endorsements to unions and whatnot. But those $50, $100, that all adds up. And if someone gives you their money, they're more likely to give you their vote as well.
One,
So I think
Joyce,
that's a great sign.
one of the cautions I would put up with this, in my own life experience in 1980, I was working for Congressman Bud Schuster, and he was the chairman of the John Connally for President campaign. And John Connally, for those who may not remember, had been the governor of Texas. He was famously in the motorcade car with President Kennedy and was shot on November 22nd.
That's right. Yep.
He went on to get reelected, was very popular. Richard Nixon made him his Secretary of the Treasury. And he had I met him, he had a very commanding presence, very smart guy, etc. So he decides to run for president. He got tons of money. He outraised every other candidate, including Ronald Reagan, in this race. And at the end of the day, I think he got one
The
delegate.
money didn't matter.
Well, we all have a race that says that. I mean, we all have a race that, we can name that. And this presidential race is coming down to a handful of states too, if we're being honest, if we're being honest with ourselves. But if we also want to look at history, since Donald Trump has been president, any Trump candidate or anyone, himself included, including 3 or 4 special elections last week in 2 different states. Now, New York, no, that's going to go Democratic, but Pennsylvania is a key state. We have won every single special election in Pennsylvania since Donald Trump has been president. I mean, let's look at that history as well. I mean,
she's making history for us.
And it's a little bit more
sidetrack. But in listening to political conversations out there on TV, when you get Democrats positing about, well, what if Joe Biden gets out of the race or whatever? One of the names that I hear mentioned regularly is our own Governor Josh Shapiro, which I find very interesting.
But we need him to stay in Pennsylvania running this. But okay, look, we got to cut it now. We'll talk about Josh Shapiro running later. But let's just say this, Jeff, next Battleground PA, we want to see those golden slippers on your feet, okay? We're going to hold you to it, okay? I can't wear any because I got to stay objective, but you can.
I'll spray paint my fellow slippers.
Have you seen them?
I don't know. I'm just saying, to each his own. And Jeff, that's good. We want to see those golden slippers. So until next week, I say thank you both for joining me. You offered some really great insights, and keep your eye on what's happening in politics. And let's watch what happens on Saturday with South Carolina. All right.
Exactly.
Hang in there, guys. See you later.